everybody says Jack has 18 majors. I remember growing up counting the amateurs, and everybody, Golf Digest, everybody counted his victory in 59 and 61 as two amateur victories as major championships. And then suddenly he went from having them to not having them. He doesn't even understand how that happened. So I think, again, it's the whole history of majors and when they counted and when they didn't count is very sort of obscure, really. Nobody really has a great idea. Everyone says Arnold, when he went to the British Open, that really began the pursuit of the major title. But you have to go back into the history of what those tournaments were back then, and they were major championships.
All right, Michael, welcome to the Golfers Journal podcast, here with Michael Arkush to talk about, very excited about this one, the Golf 100, a spirited ranking of the greatest players of all time. If you're watching on YouTube, here is a beautiful advanced copy of that book. It's out there in time for Father's Day, and what more fun can you have with your dad or your mom or your golfing partners than to debate whether Michael got this right in this.
Of course he got it right.
That's what we're going to talk about today, my friend. This behemoth endeavor of taking on ranking the 100 greatest golfers of all time. So thanks for joining us, man.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's exciting to talk to you. I've really enjoyed the book. And right, if you're going to rank, the current players or the best players of the last 10 years, that's one thing and seems a sort of a very doable thing. You can go off any number of lists or statistics, but I think the really ambitious part of this book is that you look at golf from its very inception and you're ranking old Tom versus Tiger Woods. So it's a really sort of fun read and thing to kick around. But first, I just want to ask you your motivation behind doing the book. Whenever you take on something like this and you're going to put in the research and the hours and really look at all great golfers of all time, it's a lot of effort. So there has to be some inspiration and motivation there to do it. What was yours?
There were a lot of reasons. I kept reading these obituaries that you'd see on the wires. I say wires, I'm dating myself, but on the internet. And they always felt insufficient. I didn't feel like I learned enough about these guys, and I wanted to learn more. I think that's why you do a lot of books, is because you want to know yourself what's going on, so you do the research. That was one part of it. I also was so curious at this stage of my life to go back and revisit a number of the players I got to know in the 90s when I was an editor at Golf World magazine and I covered the senior tour, and to check in on them. How are they doing? How do they reflect on their past successes and setbacks? Just how has life treated them? That was another part of it. And I was just always sort of interested in what greatness is really all about. I mean, some say longevity, some say certain truncated period of time. And I wanted to kind of decide based on researching and profiling these golfers to find out what the term really means. So all those reasons combined inspired me.
Yeah, so it is that big question, right? What is greatness? What matters when you are gauging, the contribution and the quality of a player? So how can you break down sort of the criteria you use to navigate that question of ranking the greats?
Well, one word really comes out, and that's majors. And I think that unlike more than perhaps any other sport, really, golf is defined by how you play those 4 times a year. And the 4 times have changed over the years, which events they comprise. But still, it's about when the pressure is at its most intense, who performs. We've seen a lot of players who we thought a lot of, but get into that moment and they're not ready. They're not ready for that prime time, that challenge. So I came up with a metric system based heavily on majors. 2,000 points for every major win, 500 for second, 250 third, 100 fourth, and 55th. And underneath that, beyond that, I didn't do anything else. I also did feel that regular tour events mean something, so I gave 300 points for that, but only first place. To me, Tom, winning is everything. And so that's how I broke it. But that's not the total measurement. I also have bonus points. I gave players bonus points for impact on the game, contributions to the game. Trevino gets bonus points for beating Nicholas head-to-head in those majors in the 70s. So the variety of bonus points I came up with.
So, okay, because I was wondering, how much of this is a subjective factor? So when you figure in that there are bonus points involved, that's you get to add some of your own judgment on what those contributions are. And was that sort of hard? Was it hard to not play favorites or recall the players that you loved and sort of influencing your numbers here?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I tried to be as dispassionate and detached as I'm supposed to be. That's what I learned in journalism school. I hope I succeeded that way. I really do feel that I was able to attain that. But they're also like, what about people like Tony Lima or young Tom Morris, Loreno Cho, who quit at 28? People who stopped playing earlier for whatever reason, I factored in what I believe they would have accomplished if they had continued.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you do have to, like with old Tom, or you've got to figure out, what things might have looked like, or I think that comparing how do you like rank an old Tom, right? Like, how do you compare, someone who's playing at the time when there's really only one major, right? And a Tiger Woods.
You have to look in the context of their time. How do they play against their competition in the moment in history? Now, obviously people will say, well, gosh, he had so few less people to beat than Tiger or anybody else, but he shouldn't be penalized for that. We should just judge him or her for what they did in their time period.
That's a good point. And that is an argument, right? That people bring up that like, okay, the folks who won the first AMs or the first Opens, that there were a few hundred golfers in the world or in America, but you can't, at the same time, winning is winning. And they also playing, I think, in such a small golf world, didn't have the advantages that one gets in a larger golf world. So it's just as hard to compete. It was probably just as hard to compete back then.
I don't think young Tom Morris had a mental game coach.
Right? Exactly.
And I think we're so prejudiced to modern times. I mean, people I talk to who know the ranking order, friends of mine, said Annika's not number one, the top woman. And I said, no, there's a woman named Mickey Wright who did pretty good.
Yeah.
And look her up. And I think it's important that we don't favor the present because we're so much more familiar with it. It's important to look at the whole context.
And that's where I want to start diving into the book a little bit, because I thought that was really one of the fun parts of going through the list, were how many names I'd never heard of, or how many names I've heard of but knew nothing about. And so from a research point of view, I thought that was impressive to not only, take such a broad view of how many great people have played this game, but also do the research to be able to make the case for why they would belong in the top 100. So I think a good place, now this is someone I do know something about, but I don't think enough people do know about him or talk about him. And that would be we should start off with number 100, the on the bubble, I guess, since it's March Madness season. First in was John McDermott. Tell us about John McDermott.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible how many people. Well, I shouldn't be that surprised. A lot of people have not heard of him. Two-time back-to-back U.S. Open champion, still to this day, 19 years old, the youngest U.S. Open champion ever. Played in the famous 13 Open at Brookline. Was very bold, basically telling Varden and Ray that they were not going to take the trophy back across the pond.
Right.
Brash. He would have been great in social media these days. Just highly opinionated, a fun guy to hear about and to write about. And he didn't last on the stage for long. There's so many things that happened. He lost a lot of money in the stock market. He was on an ocean liner that crashed, that had trouble crossing the ocean, and he was even put in a lifeboat. The boat was okay. It got to harbor, but a lot of things happened, and then he wound up collapsing in the Atlantic City clubhouse where he wound up working later on. and he spent a lot of his life in a psychiatric hospital. And it's a really sad story in many ways. One interesting thing is 1971, he's at the U.S. Open in Marion, and somebody in the pro shop kicked him out, basically. You see this old, disheveled guy. What's he doing hanging around the pro shop? And just as he's being escorted out, Arnold Palmer is coming in and recognizes him and puts his arm around him and basically treats him as his guest for the rest of the week, which is an amazing story.
I love that. Yeah. So as a Philadelphia guy, it's a story that I've sort of followed, read up on over the years. So I would be an outlier in that I do know something about John McDermott, but I thought it was great to see him make the list. And yeah, the story of him, the boat accident, and I guess that happened not long after the Titanic. So that would freak anybody out.
Yeah.
And he has this breakdown. So, I mean, I don't know. It's it's within 5 years of winning the Open that he's basically sort of institutionalized.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And he plays a little golf from time to time, but he played with Hagen once, and Hagen thought he would still look great. But it just shows you that, I mean, how fickle things can be. I mean, you're on top of the golfing world, and then you're in a psychiatric hospital. Right. Yeah, no, it is the ultimate golf sort of tragedy story. I've had people approach me over the years, someone should make a John McDermott movie or a John McDermott book. And you think, well, it's definitely not, there's no happy ending to that story. I guess the Arnold Palmer moment is the happy ending, but, or the one sort of bright spot, but you would hear stories in the Philly section. You'd hear older guys saying that they, whether they were out at White Marsh or Gulf Mills or something, that they were out playing and they got matched up with this old guy wearing clothes from the 1940s, and that he could still hit it and nobody knew who he was. So he would make these appearances. I guess his sisters would drive him out to play somewhere maybe on a weekend or something. And they had no idea they were playing with the first American U.S. Open champion. That's another thing. Everybody assumes Ouimet is the first American-born player to win the U.S. Open, not John McDermott. They do, exactly. That's the thing, right? So youngest, first American. And it's a story you almost never hear when the U.S. Open comes around, the Ouimet story. Because of, movies and books and things like that, it's definitely more well-known. And of course, Ouimet's longevity. So, as an also he's one player who benefited from bonus points. I mean, obviously he didn't rack up the body of work that other players did, but let's say he hadn't experienced all those troubles. Well, how would he have fared from then on in? We don't know. Major bonus points. You got to give him. First American to win the U.S. Open. Yep. I mean, just, and some bonus points from being from the best golf section in the country. Go Birds. Well, we can debate that next book. That's the next book. Top one. The Golf 100 golf sections in America. The McDermott story is, and even where he was at the hospital where he was living, I'd heard that they had a few holes on the property that he could go around and smack it around from time to time. I think a 6-hole course. Yeah. So, so a fascinating golf story, American history, golf history story, and a sad one. As I was going through the list, another one that jumped out to me when we get to, this is someone who there are a few that I didn't know much about, and this would certainly be one of them. Number 67, Joyce Wethered. So, in fact, I don't even know if I'm saying the name correctly. Joyce Wethered, yeah. I will. Wethered. I just want to read to you a little bit if I can. So what happened is she was at Sheringham Golf Club, and this was the 1920 English Ladies Championship, and she thought there was no way in the world that she had a chance to win this thing. She was there for a friend of hers. Okay, so she wound up winning the tournament, but she had this 4-foot putt on the 17th green. And the story has been told forever that there was a train going by right at the moment she's about to hit the putt. And then they asked her about it afterwards, and she said, "What train?" Okay, you have that level of concentration when you're playing, don't you?
I try to stay away from trains and most large moving conveyances when I'm playing golf. That's
That's a good idea. And here's a quote from her memoir, which is, "The point of it seems to depend on whether I heard the train or not, whether indeed I was so oblivious of my surroundings that my oblivion became a glorious instance of concentration. And that is a question which for me is still wrapped in mystery." So we
she
don't
doesn't know. Huh.
Right. Right. But for years, even in her obit in 1996, in the New York Times, they told that story. And that's the other thing. You go back and you research history and golf history. And when a story is told, it just has legs of its own that carries it forever. And whether or not it's 100% true or not, I don't think many of us really know.
So, all right. So she's playing. Give me her background and her story.
Okay, English player. Her brother Roger was a great player. She wound up winning. I want to read this to you. She wound up winning the English Ladies Championship 5 times in a row and the British Ladies Championship 3 other times. And then, age 24, she left the game. She retired. Golf was very stressful, very intense. Walked away, but in 1929. They were having the English Ladies Championship back. The British Ladies Championship back at the old course in St. Andrews. And this to her was, she couldn't resist this. So she went back and beat Glenna Collett-Vare, the great American woman amateur golfer, in the final. And that was her, to come back and beat her at that moment was incredible. And she did it also, by the way, get this, ready? She did it after being 5 down after 11 holes, 36 holes, but she was 5 down after 11.
Whoa.
And in danger of going 6 down, but wound up winning.
That's fantastic. Comes out of retirement to win at the old course. Major bonus points for that.
Major. And then later on, I'm going to keep going here if I can. Later on, she and Bobby Jones were paired against her brother and Dale Bourne, another top amateur. And she shot 75 on the old course from the back tees. And then in 35, she played Eastlake against Jones. Jones shot a 71 and she shot a 74.
Damn. She could play.
Not bad.
That
and
is
I'm going to wonder,
golf.
Tom, if I put her high enough. She could easily, I might have been able to put her higher. That's the thing with women, because I didn't have the metric system. I compared them to each other. I just used my best judgment on exactly where I placed them.
Yeah, I guess that's the tricky part, right? Like, so since you're talking about different majors and different contemporaries and like how do you bring those two lists together, right? In an equitable way. But I mean, yeah, that sounds like she had enough game to maybe be a little bit higher, which is.
Oh, Saracen thought so highly of her. He thought she was tremendous.
Very, very cool. I'm gonna get some crap for mispronouncing her last name. From our friends who love their golf history. Apologies to Scott Proctor. But yeah, that was a really interesting one to read. And I went through the list and found I wanted to see what was the highest ranking of a golfer that I didn't know anything about. And that award goes to number 23, not Michael Jordan. That's John Ball. Tell me about John Ball. Pretty high on the ranking.
I know, and I'm sure people are going to question that. Look at 9 majors, 8 British amateurs, and that's another thing I discovered. Let's not forget the importance of the British amateur. It's been lost, just like the U.S. amateur. I mean, you couldn't name the last 5 U.S. amateur winners, could you?
I could probably tell you where they went to college, but the names would be lost. Yeah.
And growing up, I mean, I don't know about you, but I used to watch the amateur. I was so excited to watch that tournament. Now, it's lost so much luster, and that saddens me really, because I think the amateur golf has lost a lot of luster, and that's unfortunate. But he was incredible. He won one. Phil's not the only 50-year-old player to win a major in his 50s. John Ball did too. Royal North Devon in 1912 when he won the British Amateur. He also won the British Open I mentioned once. Incredible player. And he also served in war. He served in the Second Boer War and was a hero. Here's a quote I'm going to read to you. He was fleeing a Boer farm on fire when another man's horse came down, and John Ball immediately pulled up and went to his assistance, getting the horse up from the poor beggar's legs. All this, of course, under heavy crossfire.
Pretty good, pretty impressive.
I don't know of many contemporary players who've had to deal with that kind of circumstance.
So bonus points for that.
Absolutely.
I would give him some bonus points. So he wins the amateur, the British Amateur, the British Open. What else went into your calculus?
Well, I mean, just he was so dominant, and to win that many British. I mean, I think the next highest is 5 or 3 British amateur titles ever. So dominant. He had a class. He was not. He did not. They were going to honor him once, and they had a big celebration ready for him, and he got off the train one stop early because he didn't want to have that kind of thing surround. He wasn't into the aura of golf. He was into just playing and the mastery of it.
Yeah.
And I just think he's a highly respectful character. And you look at people don't rank him with 9. Nobody says John Ball won 9 majors. I mean, I don't know where we got this idea of stop counting the amateur victories as majors.
Talk to me about
majors
that.
Then.
Yeah, what happened to, as you say, what the amateur was, and maybe, I mean, it still means a great deal, but it's different. And why do you think that's the case?
Well, I mean, I think we've gotten so much into the professional part of the game. Nicklaus is a great example. Everybody says Jack has 18 majors. I remember growing up counting the amateurs, and Golf Digest, everybody counted his victory in 59 and 61 as 2 amateur victories as major championships. And then suddenly he went from having them to not having them. He doesn't even understand how that happened. So I think, again, it's the whole history of majors and when they counted and when they didn't count is very sort of obscure, really. Nobody really has a great idea. Everyone says Arnold, when he went to the British Open, that really began the pursuit of the major title. But you have to go back into the history of what those tournaments were back then, and they were major championships.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun, murky history around the majors. There's the Hogan's mysterious 5th U.S. Open.
Right.
There's the debate between the first U.S. Open being at St. Andrews in Yonkers, or in New York, or at Newport. That because I remember I was at I think I was at Colonial, and they had a program from the U.S. Open in like 1950, and they showed all the winners, and the first U.S. Open was listed as it's taking place at St. Andrews, and then by the 60s, it's the first U.S. Opens at Newport. So we still, to all my friends at Newport, you're still number one in my heart. But it's just interesting, these sort of fun debates about, obviously the USGA starts after the Open at St. Andrews. So how can the USGA have a championship winner until they do get to Newport? But fun debates and fun facts all over major championship golf. I wonder though, as amateur golf, as pro golf, I wouldn't call this, it's not at its highest point with everything that's been sort of going on in pro golf revolving around money, which has left a bad taste in some people's mouth, the popularization of alternate forms of golf, or people consuming golf in different ways, YouTube, whatever. If amateur golf is, in terms of its status and stature, sort of makes more of a comeback. I don't know.
I hope so. It sickens me to see how we seem to pay much more attention to money and the FedEx Cup standings than tournament titles. And you can say that about a lot of sports. Look at college sports and the alignment of all the conferences and the loss of all these rivalries and all that stuff. But I think golf to me, the beauty of, I mean, I can't remember how much Nicholas won in 73 or 75 or any year. I can't remember how much any guy won in
Not
any
a lot,
year, really.
even though he won a
No,
lot. It wasn't a lot of money.
No, but even now, I can't tell you how much Tiger won in 2000, or I never looked at that. I looked at how did he perform in the majors.
As the wise Cyndi Lauper once told us, money changes everything, my friend. So, yeah, we're certainly seeing that across sports. And it's funny, you know, like, I wonder even if, like, you look at the USAM, and it's almost, and now with the program, and it's nice to give, you know, the college seniors an easier path to the PGA Tour, et cetera, and all these things. But, like, it almost, the AM feels like, well, you'll be seeing them on tour next year. Like, it feels like pre-professional.
Right.
So it's almost like if you really want that sort of spirit of the career amateur, it's really mid-am golf that we're talking about, right?
Yeah, and the beauty, I mean, there's so many
Spoken
really
as a
top
mid-am
players. Yeah, there's so many top players who never pursued professional golf. And yet we celebrated them at the time and thought of it as being special and honorable. And you look at Jay Sigel in your area, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Perfect example.
Yeah. Yeah. And a great man and friend of the Golfers Journal. So yeah, Jay Sigel, obvious. And yeah, there's a pretty good list of folks who decided to stay amateur. I guess now it's like Stu Hagestad and like a bunch of college kids. So, and I mean, there are others, you know, in my area also, you know, like players like Michael McDermott, and no relation to John McDermott. You know, but there are really, you know, excellent career amateur players that you'll see, you know, going into the Crump Cup or playing that sort of mid-am circuit around the country. But there is something wonderful and romantic about that idea of like guys with day jobs, right? And I guess I could say that Michael McDermott definitely has a day job. So, and, you know, celebrating that where they're feeling the pressures and limitations that, you know, we're all feeling when we show up on Saturday and haven't picked up a club in a week. So,
and that's the best example. The best example, of course, is Bobby Jones, and who I have to tell you, when I factored in and thought about a lot of bonus points, there was a moment where I really thought he might be the GOAT.
The GOAT?
You look back, the greatest of all time.
He ends up at number 3.
3 over Hogan.
Behind 2 obvious characters.
Right.
But he gets over Hogan.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yes. Well, Jones, from 1923 until he retired in 1930 at the age of 28, competed in 21 majors, and he won 13 of them.
Damn.
Okay. Nobody has had a span like that. I mean, Hogan had a good span, and Jack and Tiger had good spans. And he did this, as we said, while having a day job. And that plus the impact he had on the game. We read about it, but because we weren't around, we can't really touch it. We can't feel it. But he was he was so popular in America for a golfer, especially.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
Can you imagine 13 out of 21? I mean, you're really at that point. That's a different stratosphere. Even beyond Tiger, it's a stratosphere of accomplishment that almost I don't think there's any other parallel. I can't really think of too many parallels in any sport with that sort of.
No, and he walks
dominance.
away at the age of 28 years old. I mean, who would ever do that now?
Yeah. No, extraordinary. But he does come in at a strong 3, which was nice to see. All the Bobby Jones fans out there will appreciate that. Of course, numbers 1 and 2, it could be easy to guess for most. Was there ever, you know, well, you said Jones might have bumped up there. Was there ever that temptation to go against the grain and 1 and 2 not be Jack and Tiger?
Well, I let the numbers guide me.
Yeah.
And so I tried, as you said, I tried to remain dispassionate away from players who I might be more familiar with growing up. Obviously, Jack was the star when I was growing up. You cannot overlook the margin he has over Tiger in major victories and seconds and thirds.
Yeah, it's the seconds and thirds. Yeah,
that really puts him over the top when I added all the numbers. I do believe that Tiger was on pace. I covered the 2008 Open at Torrey Pines. So he's 32 years old right there. Victor, I remember everybody saying, okay, Tiger's, they were seeing maybe a magazine article somewhere I think I read where they had different predictions of which major he was going to put him over the top, which major was going to be number 19. And it wasn't that far off in the future. And people were even saying 25 was in range. He was on path. And then you mentioned the injury. You can put up all the injuries and, of course, the scandal and just a variety of things that kept him from ever getting to 18. I mean, I think if you had done a poll, I bet yourself included, I bet, in 2008, is Tiger going to pass Jack? And the answer was yes, no doubt.
I would have said yes. Who wouldn't have? And especially because our memories are short and we don't remember sort of Nicklaus's dominance or the fact that, as you said, how he always contended, being in those runners up and third place. It's quite extraordinary. So Jack comes in number one, and I don't want to ruin the book for folks, but it's on like the 5th page. So if they're flipping through in the bookstore,
no spoiler alert, right? Yeah.
No spoiler alert. Jack comes in at number one. Still get the book because you have to read the stories, that go with these rankings, which are really wonderful. Jack gets number one, Tiger gets number two. I mean, gosh, I guess when you think about it, though, you're talking about the way you talked about Bobby Jones. Could have gone Jack, Bobby Jones, Tiger Woods. Wouldn't it have been something?
Yeah. Right.
Really, yeah. But,
but again, and I'll argue, I mean, everybody who says Tiger at his best was better than Jack at his best, I can't argue with that. Pebble Beach 2000, St. Andrews 2000, a number of other times. If you said to me right now, I've got 30-year-old Tiger against 30-year-old Jack, or both at the absolute prime of their careers, and you said to me, Tom, you said to me, all right, Michael, you got to put down $100. Who's winning this match? I might put Tiger down there. Yeah. Okay. Very possibly put Tiger down, but you got to look at the whole body of work.
Looking at the whole body of work, we've got Jack 1, Tiger 2, Bobby Jones 3. I was, then it gets tough because, I think Hogan right there, of course, Palmer, Mickey Wright, Sam Snead, Walter Hagen behind Hogan and Snead. Well, behind Snead. I guess that's, so how did that, Hogan, there's so many stories, about Hagen, I should say. I guess was he a character? He didn't need the bonus points, but I'm sure he probably earned some.
He was an incredible character. I'm just going to read something to you. The 1919 U.S. Open at Brayburn, he's tied with Mike Brady, who's already done for the day, and Hagen gets ready to line up an 8-foot birdie putt on the 72nd hole for the win. Okay, so what does he do? He has someone get Brady from the clubhouse so he can be there and watch this.
What?
And Herbert, the great Herbert Warren put it, so he could watch his own funeral.
No.
Yeah, and I wrote in the book, I said, wouldn't it have been cool if Phil Mickelson had asked someone to fetch Ernie Els from the putting green in the 2004 Masters? So instead of Ernie on the putting green hearing the roars, he could come right to the green there and watch Phil. I mean, that's what golf needs, doesn't it?
That's sick.
Yeah. And this is what Wind wrote. Mike obliged. So the guy did it. He went out there and shivered in his spikes as Walter tapped his side hiller into the corner of the cup, only to have it twist out again and linger on the lip. So they went to a playoff the next day.
Oh, okay? He missed it. He called a shot and then he missed it.
The big story before all this is that Hagen went to hang out with his friend Al Jolson and got very little sleep, if any. Okay. And someone said to Hagen, come on, Brady's home. Brady's in the hotel. He's sleeping. Shouldn't you get some sleep? And the quote from Hagen is, he may be in bed, but he ain't asleep. Okay.
Oh, man.
And Hagen wound up winning, beating Brady the next day.
He was a badass.
Yeah. I love these stories. And during the playoff, I think I want to just forward it. During the playoff, Brady, this was on, I think, I'm trying to remember, I don't have the exact hole here, but at one point he said to Brady, listen, Mike, he saw how Brady had rolled up his shirt sleeves. And he said to him, listen, Mike, hadn't you better roll down those sleeves? And Brady said, "What for?" And Hagen said, "The gallery can see your muscles twitching." And what did Brady do? He hit his next shot way left and wound up losing 2 strokes on the hole. Talk about gamesmanship.
Right? Oh, I love it. I love that stuff. You can't get away with that anymore. Well, you can try, but then you're going to be the subject of every headline or tweet or whatever.
Golf doesn't have anywhere near the amount of characters it used to have.
Yeah. And I wonder, do you have a theory about why that is? I mean, there's sort of
What is it?
The obvious, like, all right, everyone has to be, everyone sees everything and hears everything, so you have to behave a certain way. But do you just think when it comes to top players now, like what it takes to sort of play at these levels in terms of the fitness, the mental all that sort of stuff, whatever sort of approach most players are taking
now.
Yeah, right. A program.
There's a blueprint they have to follow, really, and it goes in other sports too. I mean, the training, the support quote teams they have. Walter Hagen didn't have a team. Okay, he was an individual. So I think that kind of focus separates the players from today from before. And you're right, the exposure. I mean, if Hagen did something like that now, I mean, the amount of tweets would be unbelievable. The amount of coverage. So, but it's a loss. I do think that even when I covered the senior tour for Golf World magazine in the 90s, there were more characters than there are in golf today. And I think it's a loss again.
Yeah. Hagen would have played on Live probably. He would have got kicked off the tour for shenanigans and been making billions on Live, talking smack, or maybe not. But I agree. I think he would have played. I think it's across, like you said, it's across sports, where, you think back to baseball players in the 50s and 60s, smoking cigarettes and drinking beers in the clubhouse after a game. Not condoning either. Just saying now we've sort of commodified athletes in a way where before, a Babe Ruth or, you didn't have to be of this sort of superhuman physical specimen or behave a certain way. You could be yourself and just be very good at a sport.
Let individuals be individuals. Let's not try to have everybody conform.
Yeah, and it's amazing when someone shows a little bit of personality, how excited we all get and put them.
Yeah.
So I would just say, don't be afraid to show some personality. I guess folks get burned and don't want to, but those that do, that show just a little bit of charm or themselves out on the golf course or in any sport, man, the fans do really, really appreciate it. As many. And
you have to keep in mind of all the great players who started out as caddies. I mean, how many great players are starting out as caddies these days?
Yeah, that's a right. Well, and talk about characters, right? That's I was talking to someone about that yesterday. What's the best way to get more juniors into golf? And the decline of caddying programs across the country is certainly, there are now other programs put in place to try and get youth out onto the golf course, but the most organic and win-win situation of all of them was, caddying. So, big proponent of getting the young folks out there. And that is how a number of people in this book found their way to golf, carrying golf bags. So, now when you're doing your research, what most surprised you when you were going through these names and these stories, maybe in terms of, someone you weren't expecting to make the list or someone that you thought would make the list and didn't?
Well, I thought Scotty Scheffler would make the list, but his numbers didn't quite add up. Justin Thomas, the same. But I think the two major takeaways came from me. One was how many players, as great as they were, did not live up to the expectations we had. Now, you can get into a whole other discussion. Does the media come up with too many expectations? Think of Weiskopf, Crenshaw, Lanny Watkins, Gene Littler. Gene Littler was supposed to be the next Ben Hogan, and he wound up winning only one professional major. And some think of that as a failure. I mean, what is success and what is failure? Is it so dependent on our expectations? Is that fair? I don't know. I do know that there are so many. Davis Love III. Remember how talented he was when he started. if I said to you, he's only going to win one major, you would have said, oh, no way. I'm going on the over on that one.
Mm-hmm.
I could make a case that Phil underachieved. Given his talent, he should have had more than six majors. And you ready for this? I can make a case that Tiger underachieved. And what I mean by that is he didn't underachieve in getting to 14, but he underachieved from 14 on.
Oh, I would agree. But, as you said, with a lot of factors probably out of his control, or whether they were in his control or not, but there were, these extenuating circumstances that did limit his tries, but there's still enough tournaments out there that he could have gotten well past 14, that he was playing in, healthy as far as we know.
So the amount of players who I thought were great, but then still did not fulfill expectations. That was one takeaway. The other was how many players served their countries in the war. Lloyd Mangrum, Tommy Armour, John Ball, I mentioned earlier. We've had a lot of wars in the last 100 years, right? And a lot of these guys served, and that's not something we think of in modern players at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's the Lloyd Mangrum. I guess he has the story of, I don't get nervous on a golf course because of, right. I was in a trench or what. I don't know what the exact quote is, but
he was at both Normandy and the Battle of the Bulge.
Jeez. Yeah,
he wasn't there the day of the invasion, but shortly afterwards. Yeah,
you wouldn't be getting nervous over a 4-footer after that experience, I imagine. Yeah, that is pretty extraordinary to think about. That they're playing through, and of course the disruption that war had to golf, and people forget that there's a hole in most everybody's club championship board in the 1940s for a reason.
That's right.
Yeah. So
and that would affect people like Jimmy Demerit. How many wins would they have? Hogan. There are a number of players whose totals were kept back because of that.
Who was toughest to leave off? So if we say Johnny McDermott gets in at 100, there was 101. Who got pushed off the bubble?
Well, I never figured out who was 101, 102, 103, but I can think of guys who came close. People like Tommy Bolt, Doug Sanders. Yeah, I mean, although here's the thing. I know this. I took away points from players who did really well but didn't win a major. McDonald Smith still made the list, but he did not win a major. Harry Lighthorse Cooper did not win a major. Guys like that, who I took away a certain amount of points when they did not come through at the biggest event. But up to the British Open last year, I had a number of players who were right on the cusp. John Rahm, Jason Day, Adam Scott, all those guys, if they had won the British Open last year, would have gone in.
Little did they know what they were. And
by the way, right now, let me tell you, as we're doing this, I just looked at Rory McIlroy now is in position, if he wins the Masters, to jump up a few spots. So we'll see what happens.
I was going to ask about that. So Rory comes in at 25.
25. Yep.
So yeah, so we're recording this prior to the Masters, and if he wins, bumps up, and I would say rightly so, finishing the Grand Slam, getting it done, and seems to be, and as we're talking today, seems to be in great form. Wouldn't that be exciting? Let me debate you on a couple, or point some out. Please. That some eyebrow raisers. Bring
it on.
All right. So going through the list, folks that I was wondering, I'm like, that feels a little bit high. When you take in all of golf, we've got Dustin Johnson at number 44.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, it feels a little, a tad generous of all time golfers. And maybe again, it's my recency bias where we haven't heard too much from him lately. I mean, he did have a very hot run for a number of years, but as I looked at the folks behind him, I thought, not sure. How does he get into 44?
See, but I was a prisoner in a way of my numbers. So if I come up with this metric system and Dustin Johnson racks up those points, he goes there.
Yeah. No.
And he's had 20 some, more than 20 victories, 2 majors, a lot of good performances in majors. His numbers put him where he is.
Yeah. All right. So he gets in on the numbers. It's just when you look at, I'm looking at Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka. But yeah, Koepka certainly gets the major points, right? So Brooks Koepka at 43, Johnson at 44. But it's tough because you've got them ahead of Johnny Miller and Ben Crenshaw. And maybe that's just my sentimental.
Yeah.
But
Crenshaw only won 2 majors.
Yeah.
And Miller only won 2 majors. And Miller didn't have a lot of top finishes in majors besides that.
Yeah.
So that hurt him. Yeah.
It's like when you think from an emotional point of view and you think of overall contribution to golf, or now even thinking of Crenshaw as an architect and all these, that's in just such a, will go down as being one of the great golf names of all time. But hey, the numbers, I guess the numbers don't lie.
Yeah, and I'm not making the argument that number 44 would beat number 48 in a head-to-head match tomorrow.
No. I'm
just saying that person got more numbers.
Now, we talked about old Tom a little. He comes in at 46. Mm-hmm. There's folks out there who'd want to throw him in the top 10 just for significance.
I can understand that, given how big he was early on, and not just as a player, but what he did with Prestwick and what he did with St. Andrews. All that, his contribution to the game is huge. But he's still, I don't think he was, for instance, the player his son was. His son was extraordinary. And I think young Tom would have won 24 years old, he dies, okay? Some say of a broken heart. His wife and child died. He would have won 3 or 4 or 5 more British Opens. I think it's pretty good possibility of that. So he would have gone high. Old Tom just didn't have the same playing. He had a great playing record, but just not quite at that level.
Yeah. I mean, old Tom.
But I can understand that. I can see people saying, well, he was such an impact that he should go higher.
Yeah. I mean, you can make the argument that sort of major championship golf kind of is born with old Tom and his move to Prestwick and
right.
The Open Championship coming out of that. And so, yeah, so bonus points galore, but not necessarily the playing, or not the playing record of his own son, where they had to take a year off because he won so many times and they didn't have a trophy anymore.
I'll tell you the player though that sort of along the lines of the question you asked too, I don't think surprised me the most, but I walked away with more respect than ever, was Harry Vardon.
Yeah,
and because the 6 British Opens, the Vardon grip, the first true global star in golf.
Yep.
He, I think if you asked a lot of current players now, they might not even know who he is. They might know about the Vardon grip. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I go back to the 1920 U.S. Open. He's got the lead. He's 50 years old. He's coming down the last 7 holes. He's in the lead. And how extraordinary that would have been if he had won that, just as Watson was in position at Turnberry in 2009. We had these moments that would have been great drama in history and just came up short.
Yeah. I mean, he comes in at 10. So, he didn't get the short end of the stick. But some would argue maybe you tuck him right behind Bobby Jones, as in terms of, his tour of America, his golfing around the world. Sort of, folks will say that, Vard makes golf a global game, or at least.
And he overcame tuberculosis and the yips.
See, that's wild. The overcoming, Normandy, the yips. I mean, these guys did not have it easy back then.
Babe Didrikson Zaharias, who overcomes cancer to win the U.S. Women's Open by 12 strokes.
Yeah. I mean, Hogan barely escapes a car crash alive, wins the U.S. Open. So, bonus points for resilience. Yeah, I guess if you go on
a great project would be to really dig deep into, was Hogan better before or after the accident?
Yeah, right.
He won more majors after the accident. He played less frequently. He couldn't play more than a handful of tournaments a year. How many would he have won if there had been no accident? If I had one great question to answer in golf, that might be it.
If it's a very good question. If we can think of this list in terms of, so yes, these things that people have overcome, a lot of that goes on in this list. If we had to rank it in terms of who's the toughest, the most resilient, in all these stories of resiliency that you found, who gets the prize?
Oh boy, it's such a toss-up. Babe, Hogan, I'd throw Venturi in there, who I wrote a book with years ago, who had to, who was basically seemed like he was done before he won the Open at Congressional in '64. Tommy Armour, who lost the sight in one eye and yet became a major champion. There are a number of players who overcame great obstacles. But who's been the most resilient? You got to put Hogan right up there, and I'd put Varden up there. I'd put Gene Littler coming back from cancer. There's so many. I can't pick one, but there are a lot of examples.
You don't get in the top 100 if you're not resilient. So as you're doing all this research and learning about all these interesting golfers, and some you might have known more about or less about, what there's always that question, what's your dream foursome? But as someone who's looked deeply at these 100 players plus, all right, you've got a foursome. Who of these would you want to play with?
Okay, my dream foursome would be Jones, Babe, and who would be the fourth? Maybe Hagen, because I think that I'm not that I like them anymore, but I think it would be the most interesting sort of afternoon.
It does sound like a pretty interesting group, right?
Yeah.
Babe Zaharias, that would have been, her accomplishments. She comes in pretty high, 18, not the highest woman on the list, as you said. Mickey Wright getting it over. I wasn't totally surprised to see that, but I just assumed that Babe Didrikson Zaharias was going to be the number one woman of all time.
Did you really? Interesting.
Just going off that gut reaction to legend, the status of one's legend. Hers is quite mighty. But Mickey Wright gets it on, definitely on the numbers.
Mickey Wright pretty much retired at the age of 34. She played her last 8-9 years, maybe 6-7 tournaments a year, and she still won 82 times.
That's
and
wild.
13 majors. And in the 4-year stretch in the early 60s, I think she won 44 tournaments, a run that Tom Watson considers the greatest run any golfer has ever had.
Okay. I don't know what I'm talking about then, because, I think it's just that legendary status that Zaharias has for actually achievements across sports. I guess you get bonus points for being an Olympian and whatnot.
I actually wrote that, and I believe this, that she's the greatest athlete, male or female, of the 20th century.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. How much fun was this? Was it the experience of sitting down to write a book? I'm finishing up one at the moment. It has its fun moments. It certainly always beats digging ditches, as we say. But sometimes it feels like work. Sometimes it feels joyful, hopefully more joyful than anything else. What was the experience like for you in getting to put this list together?
It was a blast, and it was emotional because it brought back a lot of memories of moments I had with different players. But like any book project, there are moments when you're just so invested and you can't walk away from the computer. And then suddenly you get to the point where you have to walk away from the computer. You basically almost want to break the computer. Mm-hmm. You want to just have nothing to do with it. You walk away for 2 hours, 4 hours, maybe half a day, and then you can't wait to get back into it. And the hardest part for me really was letting go. The hardest part was I kept reading it over and wanting to keep changing it. And keep, like I joke in the beginning that it's amazing, that it's sort of remarkable that I didn't go back to the printer and try to change things at the end. There's so many things that you don't want to let go of it, because then it's not yours in possession anymore. It's people read it, and that you want that, obviously, right? but you also want to retain it for yourself as well. You know what I'm talking about.
I do. I know exactly what you're talking about. Thank God they have deadlines, or I would have never turned over anything. Because there is that feeling of writing is its own kind of, experience and joy and labor, but the fun of it and the work of it sometimes too is rewriting. Is going back and repairing and fixing and rethinking. Once you've done that hard work of getting something on the page, then turning that into something that sounds right, that feels right, that's paced the right way, etc. Like that, I could do that forever. I could tinker until.
Yeah. And in this case, I was rewriting some material that I had written a year and a half, 2 years earlier. Who was I when I wrote that? What did I think then? And how did the influx of all this other information affect how I now thought and wrote about that? So that was the hardest part, is trying to not be so attached to what I wrote originally that I said, I'm not going to change that. No, I had to approach it with a new angle every time.
Yeah. Right. I mean, gosh, because you could watch somebody win that weekend and start to think, wait, get Scotty in there. And who knows, in a few months, maybe Scotty will have earned a place.
Well, I'm planning to do that. I'm planning to have a paperback version, which I'll incorporate the numbers from this year, and there might be some adjustments.
There you go.
So we'll see, but it was so much fun. And again, it was very emotional to me to talk to 79-year-old Hale Irwin, to talk to Gary Player, who had many conversations over the years. It was unbelievable. His recall, his insight, Jack, a number of others. That meant a lot to me.
I think that's what makes it such a fun book, is that there are so many different voices in it. And that, obviously we all love rankings. We love to debate rankings, and rankings can be very clickbaity. But that's not what this book is. There's genuine storytelling and reporting that gets us, voices from so many different sources and people, that really, at the end of the day, the number beside their name doesn't really matter. It's fun to debate that, but everyone in the book has contributed to golf in some really interesting or exciting way. So it all comes together beautifully. So congratulations on this, Michael. It's going to be fun. Yeah, keep updating it, because we're always debating the top 100 golf courses in America, but we don't often get to debate or think about who are really the greatest of all time. And this fun exercise of comparing Harry Vardon and Tiger Woods is it's impossible in some ways, but I think you've done it as well as one could. So thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening, everyone. And if you enjoyed this episode, we strongly encourage you to become a member of the Golfer's Journal, or if you already are, to share it with your friends. As a reader-supported publication, we couldn't do it without you. We also couldn't do it without the help of our partners, and they are Titleist, Scotty Cameron, FootJoy, Holderness & Bourne, Omega, Charles Schwab, and BMW. We'll see you next time on the Golfer's Journal podcast.